Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, November 4th edition of Student Loan Justice Livestream. My name is Alan Collins. What can I tell you, folks? The election is done, and thank goodness. Whichever way this election goes, we learned something. Let me back up for a minute. For those of you who are new, welcome. If you have any questions or comments as we go forward, throw them out. I'm much happier responding to your comments, questions, editorial opinions, and otherwise than sitting here being a talking head. So we are studentloanjustice.org. We've been around for 15 years now. We fought very moderately for the first 14 and a half years for the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. Well, folks, I am here to tell you that by every reasonable, rational metric or measure, it is now a failed, and catastrophically so, failed lending system. These loans have got to be canceled at this point. Get rid of them. Now, the bad news is, you might think this is good news, but it's actually bad news. We're hearing a lot of nonsense out in the zeitgeist, including in this presidential campaign, about loan cancellation. Now, you would think that's good, but unfortunately, all of the loan cancellation plans we have been hearing about have been, nonsense. Every loan cancellation plan out there, except for ours, requires Congress to pass a law that raises money so that they can pay for loan cancellation. We endorsed both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, by the way, but their loan cancellation plan was crap. Congress, and we know this well after 15 years, Congress is not going to pass a law that raises trillions, hundreds of billions, trillions, $2 trillion to pay for loan cancellation. They're just not. It's politically an unreality. It's a pipe dream. But folks, the worst thing is, even if they did, there would be so many strings attached to whatever loan cancellation program resulted from that. The Department of Education, like it has done for any number of existing loan cancellation programs, would bureaucratize it to death, to where almost nobody would actually get loan cancellation. So we're not doing that. That's just ridiculous and asinine. We, Student Loan Justice, this group right here, are calling for student loan cancellation by executive order. Because it's a funny thing, but it turns out the president, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, the president can cancel all federally owned student loans by executive order. That's 85% of all student loans out there. The president can do this with his signature. He doesn't need congressional approval. He doesn't need a bill passed. Most importantly, he does not need one dime of tax appropriation from Congress. In other words, this loan cancellation does not need to be paid for. And think about it. These are federally owned loans. That means that the taxpayer already paid for these loans. These loans were paid for long ago, and there is no good reason for the taxpayers to have to pay not just twice, but way more than twice because of interest and penalties and fees. Totally unneeded. The president can cancel these loans tomorrow without one penny of tax appropriation. And by the way, without adding one penny or nickel or dime to the national debt. We just saw and are seeing right now $500 billion, $1 trillion, maybe more, in PPP loans thrown out to the country. Businesses, small businesses in the country. These PPP loans do not need to be repaid. And by the way, these PPP loans add tremendously to the national debt. They're very expensive for the government. So on the fiscal stimulus tree, canceling federally owned student loans by executive order, not through Congress, but by executive order, is the lowest hanging fruit on the vine. I mean, it's really kind of a no-brainer. If you want to stimulate the economy quickly, cheaply, efficiently, and in a well-targeted way, canceling federal student loans is a no-brainer. And make no mistake, folks, before the pandemic, 80%, 4 out of 5 of all student loan borrowers were never going to be able to repay their loans. It was a catastrophically failed lending system before the pandemic. We now know that the default rate for 2004 students is 40%. It's actually higher, but let's just say 40%. And the thing about that is that 2004 students were only borrowing like 1/3 or even less what students are borrowing today. So if everybody walking around with student loans right now, in fact, before the pandemic, my best estimate was that 60, 65, 70, maybe even 80%. Again, we're back to this 4 out of 5 percentage. We're going to default, either have already defaulted on their loans, or we're going to default on their loans. 80%. Let's say, okay, let's say 70, 80%. Fine. You know what the default rate for subprime home mortgages was at the peak of that crisis? It was like 18%. 18%. So we are way more than triple the subprime home mortgage default rate. And again, folks, this is all pre-pandemic data that I am telling you. And it's uncontroversial data. It's completely true. In fact, we have a speech from Betsy DeVos in December 2019, not even a year ago, where she says, 75% of all borrowers are in very bad shape. They're certainly not able to pay their loans down. But the fact of the matter is probably 65% of those 75% weren't able to pay at all. And I have it on very good word from Betsy DeVos's chief, Wayne Johnson, the chief of the federal student loan program, that number is closer to 80%. And I've heard recently that the number is actually closer to 85% post-pandemic. So this is a failed lending system, folks. The lending system is done. It's toast. Put a fork in it. The most rational thing that we can do at this point is cancel the loans. Hey, we have a comment here. See from Call Phil's. Petition is useless if Trump loses. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Call. And I probably should say a few words about the election. The most important thing you guys got to know is that we pretty much abandoned trusting either party years ago. I mean, both of the major parties in this country abandoned us. And so we have been proceeding thusly. And so, really, I don't know which would have been better for us, a Trump victory, a Biden victory. We could not endorse either candidate. President Trump is probably the wild card president where he's more likely to do something pretty radical. And oh man, now that the election is over, I can tell you guys, maybe I still probably shouldn't say too much here, but I can tell you that people at the very, very highest levels of the Trump administration were very seriously considering our proposal for loan cancellation. It was pretty close to actually happening before the election, which is what we wanted President Trump to do. I don't know why we got overruled or why the people on our side in the Trump administration. And, again, I don't think I'm going to mention any names here because he's still the president and they're still there. But these people, like, them, like, you definitely know them. First name or household name people. They were on our side and fighting for us to get the president to cancel. And it wasn't all federal loans, but it was pretty close. What they had been planning, thinking, proposing was to cancel 100% of all federal student loans for people who owed, for people who, I think it was earned, no. So for people who owed more than $100,000, 100% cancellation. For people who owed, I think, between $50,000 and $100,000, it was a sliding cancellation. And for people who owed less than $50,000, it was a 50% cancellation of the loans. So that's not bad. I mean, that's pretty good. That's far better than anything we heard from the Democrats during this race. But you know, folks, I'm here to tell you the entire lending system has got to go away. It is a national threat at this point. But whatever. We were close. We were also very, very, very close with the Joe Biden people. Greg Schultz, and I have the email chain to prove it. Greg Schultz, Biden's campaign manager, they were very, very, very interested about our ask of them. It was really more of a demand, but it was an ask. Our request, our strong request of them, that they pledge that on day one as president, Biden would return bankruptcy protections to student loans by executive order. So that means on day one, and Elizabeth Warren made this pledge, by the way, so there's no reason Joe Biden shouldn't have. He said he was going to adopt Elizabeth Warren's plan. So what that means is the president on day one would issue an order to the Department of Education and its contractors to stop opposing student loan borrowers in bankruptcy court. Now, that's not a perfect solution. It's not the repeal of the one line of code that makes student loans different from all other loans in bankruptcy proceedings, but it gets the job done. It would have been something that would have allowed us to endorse Joe Biden. It would have been that solid. Biden never did that. So here we are on the morn of the election. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but we still don't know who's going to be president as of the taping of this live stream. We are on Wednesday, November 4th, around 7 p.m. Eastern. It's looking at this point like it's going to be Biden. We're seeing a bunch of stuff about litigation. So who knows? Who knows, folks, where this is going to end? But one very important piece of information that we did learn during this campaign was that distressed student loan borrowers did not go out of their way to vote for Joe Biden. We thought they would. In fact, it is a vanishingly rare day where I have to say, folks, we were wrong about one of our predictions. In fact, we're never wrong. I can't even think, in the 15-year history of this organization, I can't think of any other time when I've had to admit that we were wrong about anything. But we were wrong about this. You know, there are 44 million distressed student loan borrowers in the country. Joe Biden, and 4 years ago, Hillary had nothing, Trump had nothing, so we were on a shelf. This time, Joe Biden was saying stuff that sounded good, right? He was like, yeah, I'm going to cancel loans for everybody who went to public college and earns less than $125,000 a year. And that was a nonsense, almost meaningless pledge because Joe Biden, his loan cancellation plan was of that first type that I mentioned at the top of this broadcast, where Congress has to pass a law, blah, 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 blah. It would have never happened. Even if it happened, it would have never worked. But whatever. It sounded good. Biden also said he was adopting Elizabeth Warren's bankruptcy plan, which we now can say is not true. If you read his white papers, he was only alluding to private student loans. And, you know, that's a trick that has been played on the public again and again by, you know, they call themselves progressives, but they're not. They are good old boys from the Department of Education that somehow managed to join places like the Center for American Progress. People like David Bergeron, who is a 40-year career bureaucrat for the Department of Education. If you wanted to look for some guy to blame on your pain and anguish about your student loans that your life has been crushed by, David Bergeron would rise to the top of the list. David Bergeron has published nonsense in the past that when you read it, it's like, oh, wow, this guy really wants to return bankruptcy protections. But then when you actually read what he wrote and read the fine print, you're like, oh, my God. Oh. Not only does he not want to return bankruptcy protections to federal student loans, he wants to feed that beast. He wants to perpetuate this big government, economy-killing, country, nationally threatening monstrosity that should have been taken to the bath and drowned in the tub decades ago. So people like David Bergeron, calling themselves progressive, and apparently who have the ear of the Biden camp, ought to be ashamed of themselves. And that's all I want to say on that right now. But let me just say, Biden's plan was pretty crap, but nonetheless, it sounded good. So of those 44 point something million distressed student loan borrowers, they should have come out for Biden, but they did not. They absolutely did not. And, just look at the state of Florida. That's probably one of the most clear examples I can think of. Florida is like our second or third largest state chapter. There are a ton of universities in Florida. 2.4 million people of the 20 or so million people in Florida, 19.5 million in Florida, are distressed student loan borrowers. That's over 10%. That's like way over 10%. It's like 15%. And it's probably even higher than that. It's probably closer to 3 million borrowers because I don't know why, but we just have a ton of members in Florida. So if ever Joe Biden was going to beat Donald Trump very convincingly in a state that historically has been a pretty close election, you would have seen it in Florida. You would have seen Biden winning by at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% because distressed student loan borrowers were coming out to vote for Biden. We didn't see that. We saw a quite close race in Florida, and in fact, Trump won by quite a lot. And even looking at the margin of victories compared to other states 4 years ago, it is very obviously abundantly clear that, and this is true nationally, people with student loans did not go out of their way to vote for Joe Biden. They just did not. So I was wrong. We were wrong. And the only explanation I can think of for that, it's not that they were just such strong Republicans and hated Biden so much that they would rather suck it up and pay 10 times more than they borrowed on their student loans because they just loved Trump and hated Biden so much. No, I don't think so. I think a far more plausible explanation, and really the only explanation I can think of, is that people with student loans just didn't believe Biden. They didn't believe his plan. It certainly wasn't very impressive. And I think to many people it was not, because Biden was pledging to forgive loans for people only who went to public colleges, and then the other cancellation bit of his pledge was only a $10,000 blanket reduction for everybody with federal student loans. And most people, certainly on this group, are like, $10,000 is an insult. We've got people who accrue nearly $10,000 in interest in a month on their student loans. And we actually do, believe it or not. There are people with extraordinarily high balances out there. So, whatever. We know that the people out there were not impressed with Biden. And quite frankly, I think that's a very interesting and I think positive thing. Because obviously the student loan borrowers out there in the country, all of whom should be on our group, by the way, they're a little smarter, a little more savvy than we give them credit for. I was sure that people would just see, loan cancellation and bankruptcy, just by mouthing the words, Joe Biden would win over their votes, being as how they've been so badly screwed and they're so desperate and vulnerable. But that didn't happen. So that just is a data point that we need to be aware of. And I think it really plays for us, folks, because, guys, even going into this election, we are a fiercely nonpartisan group. And that's for very good reason, and that is that neither party has truly been fighting for us. On paper, the Democrats have been better than the Republicans. But, folks, we've been doing this for 15 years now, folks. And neither party is very good. The Republicans are kind of the obvious black hat guys, and the Democrats are sort of the white hats. But, we had 8 years of Obama-Biden, and over those 8 years of hopey, changey rhetoric, $1 trillion was added onto our backs in the form of predatory federal and private student loan debt. So, while the Democrats say far nicer things than the Republicans do, both parties are crap, guys. We can't trust either of them. And I'm sorry, but that is just the truth. We think for ourselves here on this group. And so, really, the moral of this election is that we've got to fight for ourselves first, folks. I think both the Democrats and the Republicans will come around, but it has to start with us. And it has to start with us rejecting both parties in a very strong way, or at least, how can I say this? Not depending on either party. It is a fool's errand for us to blindly trust in either party to do what is right on the student loan problem. It just is. And so that's another reason I'm very glad this election is over, because I was getting really sick of the partisan people on our group, like just losing their minds, politicking for one candidate or another. So anyways, folks, we are in a good spot. During this election, we came a very, very long ways. I mean, we were nowhere, guys. A year ago today, we were floundering around in Iowa from campaign stop to campaign stop, begging, pleading the candidates to do the right thing. Well, here we are today. Not only did we get Elizabeth Warren to bring bankruptcy into her agenda and to do what we said and do what we asked and pledge that as president, she would return bankruptcy protection student loans by executive order, which is a huge deal. It certainly was before the pandemic, anyhow. We are the only group in the country who started talking about loan cancellation by executive order. And we did that about a year ago. Again, we were a voice in the wilderness, shouting it from the rooftops. It was maybe one article in Vice News that we got done back in August, and that was it. But here today, folks, I'm very happy to tell you that Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren introduced a Senate resolution 5 weeks ago calling on the president to cancel loans by executive order. That was us. That would have never happened but for our efforts. I kid you not. And so, when I say, folks, that this group right here is it, I'm not kidding. I know it may not seem like it. We may not seem like a huge think tank in Washington, D.C. with $1 million funding and a huge staff. But I'm telling you, folks, we are the thought leaders on the student loan problem right now. We have the right idea for canceling these loans. It is a catastrophically failed lending system. It is too late to simply return bankruptcy protections to these loans. All that would achieve is forcing 15, 20, 25 million people in a bankruptcy court. We don't want to do that. We're a better country than that. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're throwing trillions of dollars out in fiscal stimulus, and we need more right now, whether this President Trump or the next president, should it end up being Joe Biden, which is looking increasingly likely, these loans have got to go. And the most important thing you need to realize is that we, the borrowers, hold absolute and supreme control over this lending system. Right now, 90+% of everybody is not paying on their student loans. And what should happen is that going forward, whenever this repayment suspension expires, and quite frankly, I think they're fools if they don't extend it, but whenever it does expire, nobody should pay another dime on their loans. Period. We've got to stand up as a peoples. John Adams said there are two ways to conquer and enslave a country. One is by the sword, but the other is by debt. And this is precisely the play that has been made on us, on me and you, on 44 million other people in the country who were never going to be able to pay their loans, even before the pandemic. And I would say even the additional 10 million borrowers and co-signers out there in the country on private student loans, other types of loans. So folks, we are it. We own the lending system. Nobody should ever pay another dime. In fact, I will go so far as to say that if you, sitting there, if you ever pay another dollar on your student loans, and I know everybody can make their own decisions, we don't give advice, but if you ever pay again on your student loans, certainly on your federal student loans, that is not only unwise, it is unpatriotic. There are tens or hundreds of millions of people who are going to follow in our footsteps. And to pay these people money, to pay your good hard-earned money into this lending system is to feed a nationally threatening beast. And this beast doesn't want to improve the country. It's not looking out for the public interest. It is trying to feed itself and grow itself, and that is all it wants. Do not feed the beast. So think about that. There is every reason not to, every reason to stop paying. And I know a lot of people are afraid, they can garnish my wages and I'll get in trouble at work and it'll be bad at my reputation. And, were you ever going to be able to repay your loans? Probably not. If you're watching me here, you're probably part of that 80% that we're never going to be able to repay. If you're digging yourself into a hole, at what point do you stop digging? Don't be so afraid of the lending system. It is vanishing into a mist of illegitimacy as we speak. The default rate, as I said, is 70, 80% or more during this pandemic, maybe 90%. So don't feel bad about not paying your student loans if you're not. And if you're thinking about not, well, don't feel bad if you decide to stop paying on your loans. Frankly, I think that's what everybody should be doing at this point. The Founding Fathers are looking down at us and they are shaking their heads and they're saying, how did our people get so weak? Why are our people so afraid of the government? That's tyranny. When the people are afraid of the government, that is tyranny. It is. When the government fears the people, and this is Thomas Jefferson's words, not mine, that is liberty. We need to fight for liberty. And paying your hard-earned money into this beast, this predatory, nation-wrecking beast of a federal student loan system is cutting us off, me and everybody else on this group, and the tens or hundreds of millions of people who are going to follow in our footsteps at the knees. Don't do that. It's bad for you. It's bad for the country. And as I said, it's bad for the tens or hundreds of millions of people to follow in our footsteps. We were very good-faithed, tolerant, and patient with this unconstitutional, indefensible, predatory, nationally threatening lending system. For 15 years, we tried for the moderate solution, which was only the return of constitutional bankruptcy protections to these loans. The system fought back and stopped us at every step of the way. It's too late. We cannot be timid and meek and mild and walk around with our tails between our legs any longer. It is time to put this lending system down for good. Take it out to the bath and drown it in the tub, in the words of very conservative Grover Norquist. Conservatives should be on our side. Liberals should be on our side. Everybody who cares about this country and the people in it should be on our side. This is a nonpartisan thing. We are a nonpartisan group. And even the people who wag their fingers at us and go, "Grr, grr, grr, you borrowed the money, you should pay it back," they should be on our side. And if you actually sit down with those yokels and explain to them the reality of this lending system, if they're being honest, they will come around to being on our side. Because the people that wag their fingers at us, I give them the benefit of the doubt, and what they don't realize 99% of the time is that by wagging their fingers at us, they are defending and enabling and perpetuating the worst big government monstrosity this country has ever before seen. And they are enabling and perpetuating this unfettered flow of wealth into the colleges and universities in this country. Now, we're not anti-college, but the people who wag their fingers at us, they do not like the colleges, because to them, the colleges are indoctrinating their youth and turning the country communist or something. You've heard you know what they say. And almost 100% of the time, the people that wag their fingers at us, they hate socialism, they hate communism, they do not like the colleges at all. And once you explain that to them, and by the way, you may even throw in this fun fact, and that is that some of the government profits that accrue to the Department of Education every year on this lending system are used to fund Obamacare, which, again, we don't take a position, but the people who wag their fingers at us, they hate Obamacare. They just do. You may want to bring that little fun fact up as well. And let them think on that for a few days. And after a few days, they'll probably either be quiet or sometimes they even come around to join us. So, folks, this group is it. Our prescription for the lending problem is the right and the only prescription that will work. This lending system is done. The president, whether this one or the next, must cancel these loans. And I would say return bankruptcy, and we do need Congress for this. We don't need it for all the other stuff. And in concert with Congress, return bankruptcy protections to the loans that cannot be canceled directly by the president. And we need to come up with a better, more sane way to enable our citizens to get college educations in this country. And I think that involves ending the lending system and maybe never letting the government get back into the lending system, because they obviously don't do a very good job at it. But whatever the future of funding for higher education looks like, that's the next problem. We have this problem right now. We have 44 million people who are being conquered and enslaved, and tens or hundreds of millions of people who are going to follow in their footsteps if we do nothing. That's the problem we need to solve right now. Don't let anybody ever change that subject. That's another thing that our opposition, not so much the conservatives that I just mentioned, but the people who are defending the lending system, they love to stop the conversation by saying, "Oh, but what about future? What about the next lending system? What about this? No. It doesn't matter. This is the 1.6 trillion pound gorilla that we are facing right now. We can talk about the future of higher education at a later date. Right now, these loans have got to be canceled. And quite frankly, my opinion, and maybe you agree, is that the president, in canceling these loans, should also include language in his executive order which suspends the federal lending program uh, for an indefinite period of time. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years. However long it takes to come up with a better, fairer, more rationally priced way to fund colleges, and hopefully maybe only the good colleges, because there's a lot of bad colleges out there that need to hit the bricks, need to be kicked out of the funding pie party, whatever you want to call it. As long as it takes, I think that would be the right thing to do. But for sure, whatever the future of higher education in this country looks like, one thing we do know is that this current lending system is done. It's toast. It has no place in this country. You have no business paying into it. You have no business feeding the beast. And the quicker that we can grow this group, in fact, the quicker we can grow our petition to a size more appropriate to the size of the problem. Right now, we've got like 750,000 signatures or something. We should have tens of millions. We truly should. So the quicker we can get that to happen, the better off everybody will be. Do not forget that. That starts with you. Everybody watching this knows 4 people with student loans. And everybody with student loans should be very happy to know about and should be very happy to sign our petition. That is very important, folks. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat does not matter one iota. So think about it. If everybody added 4 people tomorrow, that would put us up to over 3 million signatures. And if we did that twice, that would get us to like 20 million signatures or something. It would be a lot. So it's not hard to do, but it starts with you. And if you care at all about getting this problem done, you will make it your part-time, maybe even full-time job going, or at least let's be reasonable. And let's say an hour a day job. So maybe for an hour a day, you're posting the link to our petition on Facebook. Maybe an hour a day, you're posting the link on articles. Maybe an hour a day, you're tweeting about our petition to celebrities and other people who can help spread the word about it. It's all a matter of networking, folks. We don't have $1 million budget. We don't have huge money. What we do have are people and the word of your mouth. That's the only way we're going to grow. So please keep that in mind. Wow, I've gone way longer than I really had planned on, like twice as long as I normally do. So I'm going to leave it there at that, folks. But I hope that no matter how you're feeling about this election, take heart, because we're good no matter which way it goes. We can work with whatever gets thrown at us, and we will. And we will prevail with your help. So don't forget that. So good luck. Godspeed. Ed will be back tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday. Godspeed and God bless everybody. Oh, and please donate if you could, please. We don't require much at all to survive and thrive and fight and win. But we cannot do it on nothing. Go to the website, studentloanjustice.org /support. Thanks.